Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Authors on Mission, where we dive deep into the minds that dare to tell the stories that others won't. I'm your host, Danielle Hutchinson, Chief Creative Officer here at Authors on Mission. And today we're going to be venturing into a territory that will challenge everything you think about what you know about human nature. So picture this. You're a police officer in America's last frontier, Alaska, land of breathtaking beauty and endless darkness. For 25 years, you've seen humanity at its absolute worst. You've negotiated with serial killers, investigated crimes so bizarre that they defy belief, and witnessed some sexual deviance that would make seasoned detectives lose sleep. Our guest today is Doug Fifer, retired Anchorage Police Department investigator. He's the author of 50 Shades of True Crime, a book so shocking, so twisted, it unflinchingly honest about human sexuality gone wrong, and it redefines what true crime can be. This podcast is all about writing strategies, so buckle up, Authors on Mission listeners. We're going to go behind the badge into the mind of a man who's seen it all, lived to tell the tale, and all about his writing as well. So without further ado, Doug, welcome to the podcast.
Daniel, thanks for having me. I got to hire you as my publicist. That was quite the intro. I haven't seen everything, but I've seen a ton.
Yeah, okay. Well, hey, it's from what I've seen, it has been a bunch and kind of a huge variety as well. So I'm looking forward to, chatting a little bit about that and, how you turned it into a book. It's going to be really exciting.
Sure.
So I guess, the first question we should probably start off with was, what drew you to law enforcement initially, and how did you end up specializing in such extreme cases?
Yeah, I think law enforcement started, my dad was from Baltimore. I was born in Homer, Alaska, a really small town south of Anchorage, about 5,000 people. But we traveled back east, and I met a Maryland state trooper at a Baltimore Orioles game, and he let us in for free because we were from Alaska to his spot. I thought that was so cool. I saw him in his uniform. He was kind of like a superhero, and I thought, even as a little kid, I thought, gosh, someday that maybe I want to do that. So fast forward to 1996, where I was a young professional needing a job. I applied for the Anchorage Police Department and the Alaska State Troopers simultaneously. I was hired by both within a week of them, each other, but Anchorage called first, so I ended up signing on with them and did 25 years in law enforcement, mainly in Anchorage, although we go to different spots in Alaska depending on our specialties, but most of it was in Anchorage, which is our largest city of about 330,000 people.
That's the largest. Got it. Well, hey, I mean, that's a great, way to go. It's always nice to know when you're inspired as a child, you're able to kind of live out that dream and see things come to life in that way. And I'm wondering, you've been doing it for many years, but then you decided to write a book about it. So what kind of led you to that? Was there a certain moment, or did you just decide you collected so many stories that it was time to let it out on paper?
Yeah, really good question. I think it was a career in its entirety. What would happen is when you're with friends, family, community members, kind of off the job, everybody wants to know, hey, what's the weirdest case you worked? So as a cop, you want to tell them about serial killers, you want to tell them about bank robberies, all the cool stuff you think. And they would be like, no, what's something really weird, deviant that happened in our community? So then you would get into these, fetish stories, paraphilias, really weird stuff. And that's really what the community wanted to hear more about, whether it's family, friends, or anybody. So I would tell these stories and they would dig more and more into those stories. It's not that they didn't care about the other crimes. They just were fascinated by these stories because these might be your next door neighbor, your boss, a businessman in your community. You never know who commits these type of fetish crimes. So I would talk about those and they were just amazed and wanted more and more information. That's kind of when the light bulb came on and I said, post-retirement, I'm going to write a true crime book, but based on these weird fetishes. Because there's no other book like it. And so that's what I did.
Well, hey, it's always good to fill a need that has to be filled. And being that you're asked these questions over and over, it must have been actually kind of pretty easy for you to get these on paper because you've been telling these stories for so long. I'm sure, of course, there was a process of picking and choosing which ones got in the book and which ones didn't. Would you agree with that? Was that a little bit of a planning process on your end?
Yeah, tons of stories. So you got to kind of, chapter by chapter, especially with your publisher, kind of work through what goes in, what's out, what you need more of, what you need less of. That's a longer process than writing the book. I sat down after retirement and wrote the book in about 3 months. Like you said, these stories are embedded in my mind. I worked them. It's second nature. I remembered everything. So you're getting it from the cop's perspective. Absolutely nothing's left out of this. So it's pretty intense. You get all the facts, criminal evidence, the crimes. It was fun and interesting, but it was easy to write just because I'd lived through these cases myself. And cops generally are pretty good writers. And the reason being is because you have to write police reports all day long. And these are reports that then you take to court, so they have to be professional. You have to have good grammar. So cops generally can write pretty well. Whether most of them do it post-career, who knows? But that's the reason I wrote it. I think that it was an interesting read, and I think the public is fascinated by these type of crimes, and that's why I put them in the book.
Well, that's an interesting perspective that you shared, the idea that, any police officer would have a bit of a writing background, just by filling out those reports and getting what happened down. That does require an amount of skill. And, luckily these days, I'm sure with AI, maybe some are able to kind of filter it through and polish their grammar that way. But throughout the years, I'm sure it took a lot of just like going back and revising. So there you go. That's how you honed in on your writing talents, just by everyday, police work. That's pretty cool to think about.
We got a lot of Author 101 on the job training for free. So 25 years of that, I was ready to write my book.
Wow. There you go. Just some free author coaching for anybody listening today. If you're struggling with writing, maybe consider being a cop and you can get some writing tips. I'm just
kidding. It can't
hurt. So that's really interesting. So let's segue out of the book a little bit and talk a little bit more about you and your career, because it's, definitely a very interesting one. For example, there's a lot of serious stuff that goes on with these cases. But when I was looking through your book, you have like a sense of humor in it. You kind of tell it in like an engaging way. So you must have had to balance within yourself personally a level of mental health and that humor, of course, because otherwise, it's just very difficult to process. So how did you get through all that?
Yeah, I think the humor is important, especially in law enforcement. Remember, when citizens call or somebody calls for help, it's typically not a good thing. So 98% of the time, it's something bad that we have to go to. So the job can certainly be stressful, especially if you're working homicide, crime scene, things like that. Mm-hmm. So I think that dark humor police use a lot. It's for our own self-help. It's not to belittle the situation at all. But I think that keeps us somewhat sane throughout our career, because you deal with so much all the time. So cops generally like that dark humor. What I did is I incorporated it in the book as well, because these are some extreme subjects. So very heavy lift for the reader. I was used to doing these cases for 25 years. Your readers who have a first glance at this aren't going to be used to it. And so I use some of that humor to, kind of make it a little bit softer pitch to them. All the facts are there, but I intermix it. It's not overdone. And that's typically how cops would do it on a crime scene. They would use similar humor just to get through it, to work together. So it's a fine line. You don't want to use too much, because then you're overboard. But if you use just the right amount, I think it works pretty well.
Yeah, I guess you're right. You don't want it to be too funny. You still want to get the point across and make, add the seriousness within that. So yeah, I'm guessing as you went about writing it, it must have been, a challenge to balance that out while also getting the facts across, while also telling it in the most engaging way. You're not just putting bullet point lists of the events that happened. It's a story. So that's a whole nother element too.
It is. And I think the readers like it. If you look at my reviews, I think 75% like the humor as it's put in, because it's not overdone, and it kind of helps them through the book on real serious topics. So I think it plays well so far.
Yeah, and you also add in like teachable tidbits throughout the book too, adding to the seriousness so that they can enjoy the book, but also kind of learn from it. Would you mind speaking a little bit about that? I'm sure it was obviously very intentional what you did there, mixing education with this shocking content.
Yeah, that's a really cool chapter. So teachable tidbits are things that you might incorporate into your sex life that you'd never thought about before, that I encountered on my career that weren't criminal, meaning there was an investigation. I had to look at something, but it wasn't criminal in nature, but it was deviant in sexual nature. It can be very light on the fetish spectrum. It can be serious. So that whole chapter is about things that people in our society may or may not have ever thought about, and kind of up to you whether what you incorporate or you don't. It's not criminal stuff, but it is a little bit spicy for sure.
Well, I got me curious. I'm sure all of our listeners are too. I'm wondering if you would either, maybe share one of those with us, or if perhaps you're not comfortable, maybe another one of these stories, just to give us a little taste of what, it might be to come for any listeners who hasn't picked up the book yet.
Yeah, it's real easy. And again, there's a whole chapter on it, but cough drops. I'll give you a real soft, easy one that opens it up. I didn't realize cough drops in my career, especially as a younger cop, what they were used for. So cough drops and oral sex are a big thing in the sexual community. I had no idea whatsoever. So I was on a call where they were involved in it. It was kind of a shocking to me to even hear about it. So I start off that teachable tidbits with that, how you can incorporate cough drops into your sex life, and then it amps up from there. So every one of these are actual police interaction calls where I learned this firsthand. Obviously, other couples and partners were engaging in these things. So I kind of lay it out for your readers. So it's a fun chapter. It's at the very end, and it's kind of to ease you out of the book because the first part of the book is pretty heavy.
Got it. I like that. And it's kind of a nice way to walk the reader out of the room as they finish reading it. I like that, just serious stuff, a little bit of humor with some guidance. Really good way to set it up. I'm wondering, did you write this completely on your own, or did you have a team of people helping you out? You seem to have a very good idea of how you wanted to structure it, what you wanted to put in there, the right balance between the tones. You had to have been working with someone to give you a little guidance, or maybe not. Maybe it was all pure talent. Let me know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's pure talent for sure, but I did write the book in its entirety. And then obviously with the publisher, in editing process, they'll come back to you and say, hey, what about this? Put this here, remove this. So a lot of work to structure it. The chapters, I'd say, were my idea to structure that way. So the book goes lighter to heavier in deviancy. So it kind of leads the reader, builds them up. The first chapter is called Name That Crime. That's a really fun chapter for readers. What it does, there's going to be a booking photo, a piece of crime scene evidence, something that the reader will look at. And then I give you 3 state statutes of criminal violations. You're going to kind of guess that violation based on that photograph, see what kind of detective you are. Then you're going to read the story and see how close you were. At the end, you get the answer. So it's kind of fun. It's an ice-breaking chapter to build you into those weird fetish crimes, and then it gets into real serious stuff.
That's really cool. I've talked to a lot of authors, and a lot of people do include actionable advice or activities for the reader to take on, but kind of doing your own little investigation, that's definitely something unique and very cool, and of course, very related to the book as well. Really, really awesome there, actually.
Yeah, it's a fun chapter. The readers love it. I get a lot of emails on my website that, can you do more of that? Are there additional ones, email me. So definitely the public likes it. I think it's a fun chapter, especially if you haven't lived in law enforcement. It's a way for you to see, kind of fine tune your thoughts on what that criminal did, see how close you are in getting it right.
Yeah, I guess so. So I'm wondering, seems like an easy thing that you did, structuring it this way. It seemed to come pretty naturally, even though you did mention that there's some people that you bounce ideas off of. So if our listeners today want to follow in your footsteps and, have such brilliant ideas and how to structure their own books, what advice would you offer to them? Of course, not everybody's writing a crime book, but, there must be some way to figure out how to make these elements so interactive, how to adapt it to their own books. Do you have any ideas for how it might help them?
I think a couple points. The first thing is, when you write your book, is that a lot of authors have the misconception that the whole world's going to read their book, and that's the wrong way to approach it. So you want to have a niche, right? You want to find something, an area that you're specific to, and then sell your book that way. So there's a ton of true crime out there. I could have written about serial killers, bank robbers in Alaska. I could have done all that. But really, there's no books on the fetish, paraphilias, deviant sexual crimes out there in true crime. So I established my own little niche with a community, something different for readers to grab onto. So that's the first thing, is don't write a book for everybody. Write it for a specific group, and then you'll sell your book. If you try and write it for everybody, then nobody will read it. The second thing is, when you start off your book, you have to engage the reader, either in your introduction, your synopsis, fairly quickly. We've all read the back of 500 books, and we've probably selected 10 out of those 500. So you have to be one of those 10 out of the 500. So that synopsis has to be very, very good on your book. You have to hit a home run. Then the reader will want to read more and buy your book. So those are the 2 biggest avenues. The third piece is, even if you have a publisher, you have to market your own book. Nobody does it for you. You're the best person to do it. So you have to be out there, whether it's book signings, podcasts, whatever you want, but that's on you. Don't think that people will just magically come to your book. You got to be out there promoting it. It's a ton of work, well worth it because you're the author. But those are probably 3 points I would heavily weigh upon.
That's very practical, and it's something I always do advise as well. You need to know your audience. You need to figure out what's already out there, what you can do to enhance what's out there, and also make yourself stand out. It's getting more and more saturated in the book department these days, especially with the rise of AI and all of that, so on and so forth. So you need to position it in a way that's unique and new, and that's exactly what you've done, because you're right. There's not many people with the experience you have who can write about this so authentically, and also, add in the humor and the interactive elements too. So, all
Yeah.
really good stuff. One thing I'm kind of wondering now, though, these stories are about real people and real crimes. So, was there any ethical or legal dilemmas in sharing these stories?
I'm pretty careful on protecting families and victims in the book.
Mm.
So what I'll do if it's a serial killer or somebody I mentioned in the book, that's public information. They get named, their, mugshot might be in there. That's public information. You could Google it. That's in the book. If it's related to family members, which on a deviant side of the crime, and Alaska's a small community with, especially with social media, I don't want anybody being contacted by somebody else. So I do change the names, but I do let readers know that when I do it and what the reason for that is. And it's to protect the family and victims on any of these crimes. So it's both ways in the book. Some are named and some aren't. And that's by design for protection, just to your point.
Okay, that's very interesting, and I guess it makes sense that you'd be able to just name a serial killer, for example. I don't know. I guess I wasn't quite thinking of it that way, but you're right. I mean, if it's public knowledge, then why not, right?
Yep. Yeah, and pretty
Um,
much anything you can Google, that's public information. You can
yeah.
put in a book. Where it gets sketchy is if you're naming things that isn't public information or that's confidential information. Typically, what I'd say, true crime's pretty easy because remember, there's police reports written on every true crime. So that Freedom of Information Act, that's public information. Really, cops could almost put anything in there they wanted, and I don't think it would be an issue. But I do like to protect families because it's unfair to them. If a loved one or somebody in their family committed these heinous crimes, for them to be contacted or victimized, it's unnecessary. So I keep it pretty separated, but you still get the full story. And if I change a name, I let you know why I did it.
Yeah, and that's always good to be candid about why you're changing it or that it has been changed, so you don't have too many people like accusing you of, making up a story. You're being very clear, hey, this is real, I'm just changing the names. You did mention a lot about able to be found on the internet, it's fair game, so that means you must have had to do a lot of fact checking and research, because even if you lived the case, there probably are other factors that you needed to verify or find out about. So what was that research process like for you?
The research process wasn't so much on the names or the cases because I worked them. I had police reports I could reflect back upon. I really had an in-depth knowledge on all these cases in the book. What I did though is we talk about paraphilias, fetishes. There's a lot of things in the book that then have detailed descriptions on my website, which is further information that the readers can go and click and read more on, what's in there. So that was a lot of work. I mean, there's probably 200 or 300 items on my website that I further go into explanation from the book. The book will give you an overall general review of a certain type of fetish, but on my website, I'll go more in depth into it. And that's kind of the details that are necessary just to factually back up the book because it is a true crime book.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, it's always important to make sure it is true if it is true crime, right? So that being said, I'm wondering, do you have any favorite other stories that you might want to give us a little bit of a sneak peek about? You gave us one of the back end chapters. I
Yep.
wonder if there's anything else that you might want to, share, shine a little bit of light on today.
Yeah, I think one of the most fascinating stories I ever worked, it's a chapter in my book called Kink and Ink.
Okay.
And that's where the tattoos come into, a sexual fetish realm. So it depicts a bunch of stories, reference tattoos and sex that I intertwined in law enforcement. I was sent to these calls. But one of them was there was a younger gentleman, I put him in his early 20s, but he sold heroin on the streets of Anchorage. He was a dope peddler. And I was a new cop and I wanted to arrest him. I wanted to stop the drug trade. At that time, I didn't realize how prolific it is and how hard it is to stop because the influx of narcotics is terrible everywhere, but Alaska is no different. So I was able to see him making a dope deal. And at that time, we had to catch the narcotics on the suspect to charge them. Typically then they'd keep the heroin wrapped in tinfoil in their mouths. And that way, if the police came, they'd swallow it and we wouldn't have any evidence. They would either throw it up to resell it, or if you arrested and took him to jail, they'd pass it another way later. It doesn't digest and they'd wash it off and resell it. So it's a wicked profession that they have to do. I mean, kind of rock bottom, but I caught him making a drug deal. So I ran and tackled him. He swallowed the heroin. He fought with me, but I had to use pepper spray. And for those of you that don't know, that's what the orange stuff you spray in the face that makes your eyes tear, you cough. Because he was fighting, I handcuffed him, but he had swallowed all the heroin, and I was disappointed because I didn't have any dope to charge him with. At that time, he threw up because the pepper spray was too much for him, and he threw up the shiny heroin packets in aluminum foil. Now I had the dope, so I arrested him. I was taking him to jail, and on our police reports, we ask about tattoos because law enforcement can identify people with specific tattoos. Local PD uses it, the FBI uses it. That way, if you lie about your name, we can look at your tattoos, see if they match, and effect an arrest anyway. So he said he had a tattoo on his back. I asked him what it was, and he said it's of a female. So in our reports, we had to put a description. So I said, is your mom, your girlfriend? I don't know who it is. He says it's a prison tat of a female. And I said, okay, well, who is it? And at the time, again, I was a little bit green. I wasn't tracking where he was going. So fast forward, we get to the jail, and he tells me that it's a full woman tattooed on his back. And this photograph is in the book, a rendering of it, so you can see it, because he was a prison prostitute. Now, I didn't really believe it at the time because I was a little bit new. So we went into the jail, and the jailers have a different type of requirement for searching than police do. They can strip you naked, they can put you in a cell. We can't do that necessarily as cops. So I told the jailer, hey, he says he's got this tattoo. I don't know what it is. He's being coy with it. He won't explain. I need to see it to document in the report. So the jailer made him strip down, and he did. And I'm looking at the backside of one of the most incredible tattoos I've ever seen. Long flowing hair, breast, everything. It was absolutely incredible, the artistry of the tattoo. So I was shocked. So I sat him down for an interview, not about the dope, but about the tattoo. So long story short, he was down in the lower 48. He got into heroin in high school. His parents kicked him out because he started to steal. He started selling heroin. He got busted multiple times, was incarcerated at San Quentin, which is a major penitentiary in California, one of the roughest in the world, on a heroin sentence for multiple years. The Mexican mafia then traded him heroin and said, you could pay us back later. He obviously couldn't pay, so he had two choices. They would kill him, or they would tattoo him in prison and make him a prison prostitute. He took the latter because he wanted to survive. I was always shocked about this case because I don't know what rock bottom is, but when you get a female tattooed on your back and you're a prison prostitute, that's got to be close to rock bottom. So I saw this tattoo, and it's still embedded in my mind to this day. And then I understood the power of narcotics and the power of drugs on individuals. But that story is absolutely insane. Now, it's explained a little bit better in the book because we really go from A to Z on the story. And then you get a glimpse of the tattoo yourself, and then you can see what narcotics does to people in this world.
That is absolutely, I don't even know what to say. Very interesting to think about, just logistically how that would work, in prison and how it would pan out. But very interesting stuff. And that's just like one of the stories you tell. So everybody listening, if you found that fascinating, I'm sure there's even crazier in the book. I'm going to have to look at the book a little bit more closely myself now.
Definitely check out that tattoo. It's called the Taboo Tattoo for obvious reasons. But actually the artistry, I don't know who they had, the Mexican mafia, who they had tattooing, but this guy was like Leonardo da Vinci. It's absolutely incredible. So they have some good tattoo artists in prison. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I would have never known. First off, I'm wondering, they had like tattoo materials in the prison, but I guess they find ways around doing that and they make it happen. Very fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's a good question. I do dictate in the book that anything you can find on the outside, you can find on the inside in prison. I mean, anything. So I go through a number of cases from drugs, cell phones, everything, tattoo material. We would think that prisons are confined and you can't get anything in. It's just the opposite. They have everything we have on the outside. They use money, they use, enforcement, everything. So it's interesting once you learn about the prison life on what they can actually get.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a fair share of prison shows and read a few books, but yeah, the more you learn about it, the more you're, you get an understanding. So yes, everybody else, if you're a little newbie like me on this, is a good way to educate yourself in the interesting quirks of the crime world.
For sure.
So Doug, as we begin to wrap up today, I'm wondering if you would like to offer us any other writing tips today. We spoke a little bit about the importance of targeting to readers, doing research. Anything else that you want us to take home with us and try as we implement it in our own writing?
If you're going to write your own book, I'd probably start off and, do a chapter by chapter guide for yourself on what you think you want to write. If you just start writing the book, I think that's probably the wrong way to do it. I started off that way, meaning I'm just going to write the book from start to finish. And after the first, few chapters, I realized I probably need to focus a little more and think about what I'm going to write in each chapter and then write it. And that worked a lot better for me. I wasn't an author prior, so that was kind of the way I self-corrected myself. But a lot of authors, I think, will just sit down and start writing this manifest, this book. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's going to take you a lot longer. So take the time. It's no fun, but take the time to think about what you want to write overall, chapter by chapter, and then start it there. I think it'll save you a long time. And I think, a second book, I'll write much quicker. Not that 3 months was a long time, but I think with experience, I'll draft it out a little bit better and then just dive into it chapter by chapter and write it.
Understood. And hey, that was a really quick turnaround time also, but I'm sure it's because you had all these stories in your head and you've already been telling them for a while. So understand that completely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And do you happen to have a copy of the book with you today, my audience?
I do.
There it is.
Of true crime,
right,
sex, drugs, and killer kink. You can check out the book trail if you want. My website's dougfifer.com. That's Fifer. So watch the trailer, see what you think. It's pretty cool. And then the book, you can buy the book there. You can buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. It's audio, ebook, whatever you like, whatever format you want to listen to or read, it's there.
Perfect. Well, we're going to put the link to that in the description box of this podcast today. So everybody go ahead and click on over right after we're done today and check it out. It's very fascinating. I'm looking forward to it myself. Well, everybody, with that takes us to the end of our episode for today. Doug, it's been really fun chatting with you, not only in, sharing these impossible stories, but also for reminding us that sometimes the most important truths are the hardest ones to face and the hardest ones to put into word. But you have that sense of humor and you were able to do it in such a practical way that really draws readers in. So thank you for sharing everything with us.
Well, thank you. And I hope your readers love the book.
Yeah, I think they will, definitely, especially if you're into these incredible, disturbing, and ultimately just plain human stories. So again, if you're listening today, everybody, if you have a story that needs telling or a message that can change lives, go ahead and just give it a try. No matter what the story is, all you have to do is get out there and write. So until next time, keep writing, keep questioning, and never forget the truth is stranger than fiction. Check out Doug's books on the links in the description box of this podcast. And until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and remember that your story matters. We'll see you next time.
This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.